Hello learners, welcome to our session today. I am your instructor, CPA Ringo Frederick. In our session, we are going to look at one of the most important concepts again, which you must always have at the back of our mind. And the concept that I want us to analyze today, it is a concept of known as a weighted average cost of capital, that is WACC. In the event that at this point you're looking at, we are combining, we're looking at the overall cost of capital, meaning that we've combined all these components together. That is, of course, cost of preference shares, talk about cost of ordinary shares, talk about cost of debt. We are now combining all of them together. That's why you're terming it as overall cost of capital. And explaining the concept, I'll wish us to have this question of May 2019, question number 3A, which I'll be explaining this concept using this question of ours. So what I want you to do for me, my good students, is to mark for me these costs that we had already calculated earlier on, where we were talking of aspect to do the cost of equity. We talked of the concept to do with the cost of irredeemable preference shares, and also we went ahead and talked about the cost of redeemable debentures. So that is what I want you guys to mark for me, so that we will use that question to explain that concept clearly. So looking at the weighted average cost of capital, this is what I want us to note. This is what I want us to note using, or rather explaining the concept of weighted average cost of capital, WACC. So we are talking of weighted average cost of capital, weighted average cost of capital, commonly known as WACC. WACC, weighted average cost of capital, WACC. So at this point, we are looking at it as the combined cost of raising existing funds used to undertake the existing projects. That is one thing that I want us to mark and mark it clearly. We are saying that this is a combined cost, combined cost of raising, existing funds, to undertake existing projects, We are saying it is a combined cost of raising existing funds to undertake existing projects, the existing projects. Keyword that I want you guys to underline is we are talking of raising existing funds, and you're talking of undertaking existing projects. You'll clearly see the difference with this concept when we'll be looking at a weighted marginal cost of capital, WCC, or rather WMCC. You'll find that I will be having the difference between WCC and WMCC. So at this point, that's why I want you guys to underline the concept to do with raising existing funds to undertake existing projects. Also, another key concept that you should always be able to understand anytime you are dealing with WACC is that it is also called the overall, actually other dash you can add that and say that this is also called the overall or composite cost of capital. This is also called the overall or composite cost of capital. Since various capital components have different percentage costs, it is important to determine single average cost of capital attributable to various cost of capital. So basically, at this point, we are looking at it in a case whereby we are saying that we'll be required to first of all calculate each single component. Then later on, we'll be looking at the average part of it when it comes to the entire project as a whole. So that is very key for us to always understand. So that should take us to the steps in calculating WACC. It will also be very vital for us to understand steps in computing WACC, steps in calculating WACC. Steps in calculating WACC. So number one, we are saying, number one step, what you need to do is to calculate composite cost of capital, calculate the composite cost. What will constitute that, i.e. we are talking of, you need to calculate your KE, you need to calculate your KD, you need to calculate your KP. And by now, I know you are very good in computing all this. By now, I know we are professionals actually in computing the aspect to do the cost of equity, cost of debt, and also cost of preference shares. By now, I know we are very good in computing that. Step number two, my good students, we'll have to calculate weights of each capital component. Calculate weights of each capital component in the firm's capital structure. Calculate the weights, calculate weights. Number two, we are saying calculate weights of each component. Calculate weights of each capital component of each capital component of each capital component of each capital component. Calculate weights of each capital component in the firm's capital structure. 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 So we'll be required to compute our weights. We'll be required to compute our weights. In that, at this point, basically, you'll find that in computing these weights, we use the market values. We'll be using the market value. So meaning that in the event that at this point, I'll have to look at, say, for example, maybe I'm having equity. The market value of equity maybe is 300,000, just an example I'm giving. Market value of preference share capital maybe is 200,000, and maybe market value of debentures, maybe is say like 400,000. So in computing our weight, what we'll be using, in this case, of course, this total should give us 900,000, right? So I'll just be taking like or take this to be 500 to give us 1 million. So I'll just be taking like 300 of 1 million, 200 of 1 million, and talk about 500 of 1 million. So whatever that I'm going to determine at that point, that is what will give us what will give us our weight. And mark you me clearly that we are saying that under weighted average cost of capital, basically, we will be determining these weights using the market value of our component costs, using the market value of our composite of our component, or rather using the market value of our components, which in this case we're talking of equity, preference, debentures, etc. So that is how we are going to use our weight. That is how we'll be determining our weight. Then the next step after we've computed our weight, the next step after we've computed our weight will be step number 3. And step number 3 again will be simple, because step number 3 we are saying we multiply each component cost, multiply each component cost, multiply each component cost, multiply each component cost by its respective weight, by its respective weight, to get the weighted component cost, to get the weighted component cost. We multiply each component cost by its respective weight to get the weighted component cost. That is one thing that again we must understand, and understand very clearly. So you'll find that if we will be able to follow this procedure clearly, whatever that we'll be arriving at, we will be arriving at the weighted average cost of capital. We will be arriving at the weighted average cost of capital, So basically, this is what I want us to have in mind anytime you're talking about the weighted average cost of capital. So, to cement this concept clearly, my good students, I want us to handle the question that we are looking at earlier on. That was May 2019 question number 3A. And this question, remember the last part, you were asked to compute the weighted average cost of capital. And that is what Mwalimu will want to handle in this session today. This was a question. Look at part number 4. Look at part number 4. Part number 4, these are what we are asked to compute the firm's weighted average cost of capital, that is WACC. The firm's weighted average cost of capital, that is number 4. Remember, we had already tackled part 1, part 2, part 3, and right now we are in number 4. So, mentioning that, let us go straight onto the question. And see how will we compute our weighted average cost of capital. So to do that, I'll want us to mark these figures of ours. I'll want us to mark these 3 figures of ours. That is, of course, cost of equity. I'll mark them somewhere. Cost of equity, we had computed it to be 21.5%. 21.5. I'm having cost of debt, cost of preference shares, sorry, we had it 11.67. I'm having the cost of debentures. I'm having 2.19%. So in that case, I can now erase here confidently, so that I can comfortably erase here. And now what we want to do is to compute our weighted average cost of capital. That is what allowed us to do, to compute our weighted average cost of capital. So WACC in our question. Remember, we'll just follow the procedure that I've given you, these steps, of which step number 1, clearly we've said that we are going to compute or to calculate the composite cost of capital, which you've already calculated the same. Then we need to calculate the weights of each capital component in the firm's capital structure. And we've said that calculating our weights, we'll be using the market value. We will be using the market value. So that will be simple. now, because using the market value, so we are talking of our source, or rather the component that you are looking at. We'll be talking, of course, of the market values of our component, market values. Then you can determine our weight here. We can determine our weight. So the first component I'm having is ordinary shares. First component that you do have, of course, is our ordinary shares. Kindly check it out. That is, of course, whatever that I was given there in note, ordinary share capital. It was valued at 20 shillings per value. That was 20 shillings per value. So how will we determine our market value? To determine our market value, the first thing that we need to do, my good student, first of all, is to determine the number of ordinary shares that we'll be having. So if the our capital structure constituted of 50,000, look at our quotient clearly. Let me put it on top here so that all of us should be able to view it. Look at the value of ordinary share that you are given there. We are given 50,000, and of course our figures are in million, right? So I'm having 50,000, and each was going for 20, meaning that should give us how many ordinary shares? That should give us how many ordinary shares? 50,000 divided by 20, that should give us 2,500 ordinary shares. 2,500 ordinary shares. 2,500 ordinary shares. We multiply by the market value of our shares. The market value of our shares, in that case, recall, we had determined a figure of how much in our cost of capital. Just look at our market value, our PO. PO, in that case, the dividends market price per share, we had computed it to be 40. So that should give us a market value of these ordinary shares, which I should be talking of by 40, which will give me a figure of 100,000. So our market value is 100,000 for ordinary shares. We proceed to the next value, which in this case I'm talking of 12% redeemable debentures. So 12% redeemable debentures. 12% redeemable debentures. What will you be having? The same case, how many debentures will you be having? Stock. How many debentures will you be having? In that case, you can clearly see that our debentures, we are given 25,000 per value of 20. We multiply by the market value of the debentures, and market value of the debentures, my good students, you had computed it to be how much? Of debt. Because it had a component of interest where we took 112 minus the component of debt, which in that case, I can clearly see we got 109.6. Remember this value that you had calculated? Remember the value that you had calculated, right? 109.6. So if we work it out, what will we be having? We should be talking of 25,000 divided by 20 times, that should give us 1250 by 109.6 to give me a figure of 137,000. I'm getting a figure of 137,000. I'm getting a figure of 137,000. Another component here, what do we have? We have 14% preference shares. We have 14% preference shares. 14% preference shares. So talk about 14%. preference, redeemable, preference shares, that is irredeemable. These were irredeemable, remember. Irredeemable preference shares. So I'll just take 14%. Preference shares. Preference shares. The same concept will apply. I'm having here, we are given 15,000. We divide by 25 times the value of preference shares. In that case, we had computed it to be how much earlier, all my good students? We had computed it to be, that was 33.5 minus the dividends, which was 3.5, so it gave us 30. So in that case, we should be talking of a figure of 18,000, right? Kindly work it out and see what we'll be having. We should be talking of 18,000. Then the other key element I'm having here, which is also our component, we are having retained earnings. Retained earnings. Retained earnings, we are given a figure of how much? 30,000. If you can clearly see in our question, I was given 30,000. Check retained earnings, I was given directly 30,000. But recall, we had not computed the cost of retained earnings. We had not computed the cost of retained earnings. We had not computed the cost of retained earnings. So the cost of retained earnings, recall, it will just be almost the same as cost of equity, which in that case you had already computed our cost of equity. It will just be the same as the cost of equity. It will just be the same as cost of equity because we didn't have flotation cost or any form of discount. So therefore, it will just be the same as cost of equity. Which cost of equity? We had computed it to be 21.5%. 21.5%. So therefore, the moment you do have that case, confidently, I can come and determine our weights. How will we determine our weights? First of all, let us determine the total here. 100, we should be talking of 100 plus 137 plus 18 plus 30 to give us a figure of 285,000. So therefore, our weight here, we should be talking of 100 of 285,000. That should give us 100 divided by 100 divided by 285 to give me a figure of 0.35. 0.35. 137 we divide by 285, that should give me a figure of 0.48. Then talk about this other case, 18 divided by 285. That should give me a figure of 0.06. Whereas the other one, we should be talking of 30 divided by 285. That should give me a figure of 0.11. Right? So that maybe if we can sum it up, 0.35 plus 0.48 plus 0.06 plus 0.11 should give us 1, right? So that is our weight. Then we incorporate our composite cost. We incorporate our costs. And the cost of each component, we had already computed the cost of each component here. We had already computed the cost of each component. So our case will just be a matter of copying and pasting. So therefore, we should be talking of cost of each component. So talk of our cost. Ordinary share is 21.5%. Cost of equity 21.5%, because we say that they just be the same. Whereas cost of preference shares in this case, I had 11.67%. Kindly confirm 11.67% the cost of preference share. Then cost of debentures here, we had 2.19, the one that you had computed, right? So therefore, our weighted average cost of capital, we should be talking of 21.5 by 0.35 by 0.35 to give me a figure of 7. So weighted cost, we should be talking of the first one, 7.525, 0.48 by 2.19 to give me a figure of 1.051, then 0.06 by 11.67, 0.7002, 0.11 by 21.5, that should give me 2.365. So that if we can sum it up, we should be talking of plus 0.7002 plus 1 point plus 1.051 plus 7.525 to give me a figure of 11.6412. So our weighted average cost of capital, therefore we can agree our weighted average cost of capital, WACC, we can agree is 11.6412%. And that is our weighted average cost of capital. So long as you know how to determine your costs, then how to come up with your weights, you are through with WACC. You are through with weighted average cost of capital. So basically that is what you are required to do. So in this case, I want us to meet in the next session whereby we are going to handle another question for WACC. To this point, my good students, thank you so much, and let us meet in the next session. Thank you.